Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Barnes.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Hi Mark, I hope you're enjoying WA and it's not raining bucket loads like it is here in New South Wales.
Yeah, well, I've had some really good weather, and the last clinic actually, we always have an indoor hide, but they had an outdoor there. So the weather was so nice and it was cool weather. So everyone over here has also had quite a bit of rainy weather. So they all wanted to be out in the sun. So it was nice. This clean, but not a lot. Yeah, it's been nice over here. Bit of a change from the wet.
That's great. You can enjoy the Australian winter. Mark, I've got some questions this morning from our members. The first one I'm going to hit you with is from Coral. She's got a fresh off the track pacer who's doing really well transitioning to riding. She'd like to know, what exercises would you recommend for building balance and softness?
So when standies, not standies as in the breed, actually, I'm sorry, I don't want to be critical. So standies that have raced, as in, they've raced, and they've, the thing that you really sort of want to be working on with them, especially, and like all horses, but pull a cart, like if you imagine sort of, push starting someone's car, or pushing someone out of a bog with a car. So when you push, what you tend to want to do with your with your legs is you want to push them back, and you push like that. So with any horses that done any harness racing or harness work, sometimes you want to encourage them to sort of, step through when they walk. Something I do a lot of is softening their hindquarter up and doing a lot of backups, because you want to back them up to a stage that they actually put their hind feet right underneath them, because some of those horses, they reach out a long way but they don't come through a long way when they put their foot on the ground. So, you want to encourage them to do little exercises like good hindquarter. You get the horse to walk around you, you get them to pick up in the wither, and then you get them to step over softly underneath their rib cage. From that sort of hindquarter yield, you might sort of turn that into a backup. So you go hindquarter yield, back up, hindquarter yield, back up. And that just gets them very confident on their hind, that they're lifting up with their hind feet, instead of just push, moving forward, pushing weight. So it's important to do a lot of that. There's thousands of, not thousands, but there's a lot of different exercises. But I think one of the ones that you really want to work on is that. And when I say do hindquarter yields, I don't mean sort of just, get a stick and chase their hindquarter around, so they're burying their inside front foot into the ground. Before you do those hindquarter yields, you kind of want the horses kind of leading softly around you, that you can pick up, like, so say for instance, if I was the knot on that lead rope, I'd be picking it up, and I can feel the horse kind of pick up and soften in the front feet a little bit. So they're softening, picking up their wither, and then I'll put a little bend in them, directing that bend. Once the horse is bent, directing that feel back towards him, loosen up and move the hindquarter over. So that hindquarter yield, where you put a little bend in the feel of the lead and move them around, is really good. But got to incorporate the sort of lift of the wither and the loosening of the front end. Because if you just did a sort of move the hindquarter with them burying their front down, sort of, it's a pathway to nowhere, and it's not really going to help the horse at all. So that's a good start to get the, balanced. And as I said, that hindquarter yield leads into a backup. So you do a little hindquarter yield, and it could be a forward hindquarter yield, feet are crossing over in front of each other. And then you can sort of just get them to back up a little and start to back up nice and soft. And the more confidence they get in the things like that, the more they'll sort of put that hind foot on the ground for longer. And the other thing for the horses that have harness and stuff like that is just, following the feel of the rein into a turn and bending and stuff like that. Not just bending like lateral flexion where the horse bound and their whole body's still sort of like straight and stuck, but the bending where the horse is kind of following the feel all the way around. So, yeah, just lots of turns like that where the horse is just turning and following a feel of the rein all the way around, backing up, moving the hindquarter. And they're things I'd probably start on and working on, and then sort of grow from that. When you've got a bit and stuff like that, you might ask them to sort of really step into their turns a little bit, but that's a bit later on.
Coral's had a look at our series on addressing brace and reducing brace. So
that there is like that little particular horse was quite bracey, because it's funny, I have some ex-harness horses come through and they're actually bracey, but they're sort of fairly limber. But he was a very particularly bracey, very rigid, and some of his rigidity was the level of anxiety he carried. Like there's one of the clinic that I'm doing at the moment is a lot looser and can really flow and move, but it doesn't have that level of anxiety that that bracing rigidity in them.
So yeah, it really goes back to just the individual horse, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and the next question, Mark, is from Megan. She is doing some working equitation and she'd like to know how to teach her horse to side pass. She has to do it along a pole for working equitation, and she needs to use it also with a movement when they're approaching a gate side on to open it.
Walking a horse laterally sideways. I won't go into it in the detail of getting a horse to sort of start to sort of look in the direction of travel and sort of, move its hind and really bend in the direction of travel and walk sideways in a sort of half pass or side pass manner where the horse is really sort of shaped dressage way. I'm going to treat it as a basic leg yield where the horse is just sort of moving, to move across poles, like you said, moving 8. So the way I like to teach it, and some people that, in the early days until I explain, they may have left they might have fenced at one of my clinics and left after one day and said, Mark doesn't use legs. And it's funny, I do use legs. I use legs for different things, and one of those things will be a leg yield. But I like to teach first, and so basically, to get the horse to sort of soften hindquarter, one of the first things that sort of like I'm trying to do. First things in the under saddle part of it, which you can do I'm going to talk about it on the saddle, is we're going to teach our horses to softly follow the feel of the inside rein. And it's not the leading inside rein, the inside rein, which is an indirect inside rein where the rein comes into the belly button and might lift up a little, but it doesn't sort of cross over strong. It just lifts up and the horse kind of relaxes and releases its hindquarter. So how it releases that hindquarter is it sort of thinks softly into the inside rein. It loses that outside thought, because sometimes, they're pushing and thinking through that outside eye and leaning out through their shoulder. So I want the horse to slide around softly, where they're just following softly to the inside rein. And then when we lift it up, the horse wants to rebalance by rebalancing through its hindquarter. And it just steps over and softly. And once that's established, that's like a pathway to the hindquarter. So we put rein softly, the horse just relaxes and moves his hindquarter over because in balance with the rein. And that's when the horse is bent to moving its hindquarter to the right. And over time, it gets better and better that the horse doesn't have to bend a long way if you didn't want it to. And once established, that's got, the horse knows how to move its hindquarter. And if you've got the open rein established, where you lift and open a rein, the horse will just look and follow and reach out and move the shoulders over. Okay, so once you can separate the front and the back through the reins and the horse is comfortable with that, then all you've really got to do is teach a horse to think sideways. So you can do that in the reins. So that's where you might sort of pick up an indirect rein, and then you'll open the other rein a little bit. And when the horse is walking forward, you'll pick up that sort of position, and the horse will know that okay, if you pick the horse nose to rebalance the hindquarter, if you open up a little, the forequarter will come through and the horse sort of travels sideways. So that's the way I'd teach it through the rein, get to a stage that you can just sort of put the reins down and move the horse over off your leg. So if you've sideways already established, and that's what I'd rather do, that's my preferred way of doing it, because if we don't have that sideways established in the reins, what we end up sometimes blocking the horse with the reins and just pushing the leg on and moving it across. And more and more, the more and more I end the reins and the more I delve into brace, the less and less I want to put a block on my horse. So I don't want to always block the horse. I want the reins to guide the horse. So that's why I discourage going straight for the legs and just putting the horse on a fence or blocking it with the reins and saying shove it, because we're adding also too much energy into the horse and then having to block it all. So I like the horse balanced in the reins. So to go back to the question is, what you're wanting is just a side pass the horse, like leg yield it across a log or up to a gate. And when you go up, sometimes you're messing around, you've got one hand and in working equitation, the more advanced you get, you're going to go to the one-handed riding. So you want the horse that it can yield off your leg very softly. So what I'd be looking at is, once that sideways is established, I just talked about, is I would then say, okay, I want the hindquarter to move. So I'm going to put my leg back a little bit, just add a little feel on my leg, and I'm going to pick up, nearly pick up the rein that moves the hip over, the indirect rein. I'm going to put my leg back, and as I feel a little bit of energy come into my horse, as that leg starts to push on, and that leg is just one leg back a little bit where you want the hip to move over, then when the horse kind of pushes forward a little or anything, I just pick up the indirect rein, and then the horse will just step over because it knows that the indirect rein quarter over. And then you just repeat that. You put the leg on, you pick up the indirect rein, the horse moves his hip over. And that teaches them to just yield off that leg a little bit. And what will happen is you'll get to a stage that every time you do that little movement, you'll put less rein on, until the horse starts to say, okay, one leg back means move off the leg. And you can do that on the ground as well. And you can get a horse to a stage that they can offer a specific feel of the leg, of your hand or anything like that, or off the hip. That's a lot of things you can do on the ground. But I find doing it in that order, what happens is the horse knows how to move the hindquarter. Don't have to bump and get big and get it to move away from undesirable pressure. You just add that leg, put a little feel in it, and then you pick up the rein. The horse knows how to move over, and two together. So the horse eventually knows that one leg on, move across. So basically that's the way you start to get a horse to move sideways off a leg. So then you can change the legs. So there's sort of like, a position which is more in the middle, just behind the girth. And you can start to sort of use that leg, put that leg on over. So, but once a horse can move its hip, then I might open the rein and say move its shoulder over. And then I'll get to actually pick up the rein position, ask the horse to go sideways, and I'll add a leg in the middle and the horse will just move over. It'll be one leg on, the other leg will be open. I'll just sit straight on, no sort of fancy seat positions, just to move off a leg, move over. And then you'll get to a stage that, you'll open up a leg, you'll close a leg, and the horse will move into that open space and soften, and move into that open space and soften. But as I say, you've taught the horse that through the reins first, so you don't end up like just pushing hard and blocking a lot of energy because you've never, taught the horse balance in the reins. But yeah, once you get to that stage, you can just sort of, lift the weight of the rein up, put a leg on, horse moves over, and it's simple.
It's simple. I somehow feel that it would be a little bit more than just simple, but that sounds great. A lot of detail. Thank you very much. So the third question, Mark, for today, and the final one is from Holly, and it's a bit of a different question for you. She has been working with her gelding, using a slightly different technique and very similar principles to and style to you. So calm, grounded, mindful of body language, as well as horses. But she'd like to know, is it possible, do you think, to use two different training techniques, or is it better to stick with one? She does say her horse is very dominant, confident, desensitized, and anxious, and they spend a lot of time on relaxation. She doesn't want to confuse her horse. And she was thinking that maybe she should just stick with one training technique for 3 or 4 months, but was wondering what your thoughts were.
There's an answer and there's no answer to that question. It's an interesting subject, and I get this question asked a lot because sometimes I get people that have been trying one sort of technique and they come to my clinic and they go, well, gee, how do I blend this? And it's not like you can mix two things together and it works. And I think some people that I've had over the years that have come to clinics and worked with me, and then they've tried to mix it with what they already do, are conflicting with what I'm trying to ask them to do. So the way I try and get people to look at it, because I can't all the time, and some people go back to instructors, and there's some things that those instructors are doing that the person is not so comfortable with, but there's other things where that instructor's really helping them. And they sometimes ask me, how do I work with this where, and I say, well, you've got to take what you're getting from that particular method or instructor that works, and then, there's some things that I'll teach you that work, and how you, I think sometimes is, say, for instance, now I'm not, it's hard when you talk about, as I see, there's a lot of different ideas and there's different techniques and stuff. And I don't ever think there's, one method versus another method. There's a few things that are very, stark contrast. Like, I drive horses or I direct horses. That's like stark contrast. Driving would be, I point and add my energy into the horse, and I don't regard where the horse's thoughts are. I just want to move away from pressure, focused on the pressure. Directing would be, I want to get that horse to think about what it's doing. I want it to think in the direction of travel. I want it to travel soft, having made that decision in the direction of travel. So, if someone's trying to juggle one instructor, another instructor, and one's telling them to direct, well, there's going to be a real conflict in the horse. So I wouldn't mesh the two together. But what you're saying, relaxation and stuff like that, and there's a lot of stuff in what I'm doing that obviously you're seeing is very, beneficial for what you're similar. But there's also things I'm going to say that, hey, I'd try this differently, and I think you need to add a little anxiety into the equation because that's where your horse struggles with pressure. But that's a whole nother subject. But going back to the original question, is can you or can't you? Or say to everybody is, okay, let's simplify it. Okay, once upon a time, if I wanted the horse to do a certain thing, I knew this way and this way to do it. And then over the years, I still remembered this way and this way about this way and that way. So from those two ways, I suddenly had 4 options. And with those 4 options, one of those ones I could scrub out. So I'd scrub out that bad option because that option was the one that was clearly on horses, was not working very well, and it never ended up that good, but it was the only thing I knew once upon a time. So as I gained more knowledge, I'd scrub out the worst thing or the things. So I'd bring with something better. So what you've got to look at is when you're working horses is it's not, one versus the other. It's I've learned 5 things, and these 5 things, I can scrub out one of those because that's a bad way of doing it. Now I've learned this way. It's more effective, it's better for the horse and all that sort of thing. And I think that's all you're ever doing all the time. It's not one method versus the other. It's like working out one extra thing if you can scrub a bad thing out, because some things, that's why I say I do it like this and not like this, not because I've never done it like that. It's because I've decided to scrub it out because I found a more effective way, or I had a deeper understanding of what and how the horse was to feel about what it was doing. So I chose a different way. So as you learn, you'll figure out how to do that, and opposed to trying to mesh all these methods together. It's just there's only so many ways you can do something, and some of those ways are going to be good, some are going to be good, and figuring out how to sort of turf out the ones that aren't so good and take on the good ones. And I think I'd see it like that all the time.
And I guess it's really important that as you're working and you come up with questions in your mind, if you're unsure about something, this is where you can hit us with a question and hit Mark up and really sort of explain things. So, like for example, you just mentioned a bit of a seed there for me, which I'd like to touch on another day, which is, well, why do we need to add anxiety in our training? We won't go into that now, but I think that's a really good subject that we could cover at another day. And also it'd be really good, Mark, to talk to you properly about how your training techniques are different from other approaches and really nut it out, not in a critical way to other trainers, but just on a, factual, this is what you do and this is how it's different and why. I think that would be fascinating. So if anyone's got any thoughts on that, definitely leave a comment at the end of this podcast, drop us an email, send us a message, and we'll hit Mark up with some questions based around that very soon. All right, thanks very much, Mark. I can hear some background noises there, so I think you are expected at dinner. You better go and join the other. Mark's obviously in the middle of a clinic right now. Not in the middle of a clinic, but he's teaching, has been teaching today and is teaching tomorrow. So we'll let him go. Thank you very much for your time, Mark, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, buddy.
You can learn more from Mark online through his online training videos. Just search Mark Langley Horsemanship. There's over 380 training videos which everyone has access to with a 7-day free trial. If you like what you see, it's just $15 a month from there. That's help where you need it.